Mariko Mori is another artist who is identified as a global artist who, again, was trained and much of her career has been in the West. So she's another one of these hybrid figures. We will see a few exceptions to this in the next session on materiality, but you'll see this over and over again. If you look at what's at the work that's shown at the biennials, is often we see a Western education. Sorry?
I'm just commenting. It looks to me like a feminine Salvador Dali.
Okay, so what makes it look like a Salvador Dali?
Things floating around being where it shouldn't be.
It's surreal, right? It doesn't look like a world that we could inhabit. So Mori's work engages with fantasies of the future, primarily. That's how she really came to prominence in the 90s. Looking at the ways in which our contemporary culture articulates what we imagine coming down the pipeline, as sort of Jetsons of the art world. So she began her career as a model, and then she studied fashion. So this is important. She spends a lot of time in front of the camera, and she makes her own costumes. So that early professional engagement with the fashion world wound up being really central to her art practice. She went to London. She studied at the Chelsea College of Art for her MFA, and then she participated in the Whitney program in New York. And we'll see she's spoken about the ways in which her practice shifted or changed when she moved to New York. When she went to London, she wanted to be understood as a sort of universal figure. She didn't want her ethnicity, her cultural background to be a part of the way that people understood her. And then she arrived in New York and she was like, I give in. She says that the context of New York culturally was so diverse that just everybody was expected to sort of bring and put on the table wherever they had come from. And so she began to engage with the specificities of her cultural history. She's particularly interested in teen culture, right? Which in Japan really blossomed in the 1990s. She said that when she was growing up, the culture of teenagers in Japan was just sort of derivative. She saw teenagers borrowing and imitating Western models, and then when she came back in the late 90s and early aughts, she saw this very specific, unique youth culture that had emerged in Japan. She's also very interested in gender roles in Japanese culture and the ways, the expectations of women in Japanese culture. So I just want to contextualize her in relation to a couple of other artists who are doing similar work. So are you guys familiar with Cindy Sherman? Yeah, so what is Sherman known for? What is she famous for? Okay, so this performance of stereotypes. Now, in this case, this is from her early work. What do you see her drawing on here? What do you think the source material is? Sorry?
Films.
Films, yes, absolutely. Films of the mid-20th century. And Morimura, another Japanese artist, who is he emulating? Frida Kahlo. He had an entire exhibition of self-portraits as Frida Kahlo. And his practice has involved substantial work where he presents himself as women from art history. So women in paintings, Manet's Olympia. He has a Manet's Olympia. He has the collection of Frida Kahlo images. I do want to note that while he's drawing on art historical sources for most of his work, and Sherman is drawing on cinematic sources for most of her work, they both flip at certain points. He has Marilyn Monroe photographs, and she, in her more recent career, has these art historical presentations. So how can we read Mori? I don't know, these images aren't super, but just looking at them, how would you relate them to these? I mean, what is this character? Who is she playing, do you think?
An anime character, isn't she?
Yeah, she's an anime character, a sort of robotic superhero. And here she's sort of a futuristic office girl who participates in the tea ceremony, who serves the tea. And she has spoken about this particular role of the office girl and this sense that in Japan, women are generally not expected to be ambitious. They're not encouraged to be ambitious. Yes, go to work, but just be a nice office girl. And she's like, I want more than that. Oh, sorry, there should be an H there. That's a typo. It's not play with me, it's play with me. So while these two are looking back in time for their sources, she's, well, is she looking forward in time, do you think? Do these read as futuristic to you?
No. The oppression of women in the Cindy Sherman 1950s film.
Mm-hmm.
But, the 1950s housewife right there, serving
but
tea.
What's going on with these weird shiny bits?
Well, it's a contrast to me. Like, she's looking like this very futuristic being, and yet her job and her role in society has not changed at all.
Yes. So this sense, it's futuristic, but again, she's playing these sort of little girl characters who don't really contribute. They're there to fulfill a role. Does anybody listen to, it's a radio program, public radio, the History Guys. Anyways, it's a history program, and they recently had a thing about the Jetsons, and they were like, everything was really futuristic except for the social and cultural world, right? There are no people of color in the Jetsons. The women are all housewives. There are no social changes. And so she's playing in her early career with these sort of, the ways in which these models of the future are in fact not very different from the contemporary world. They're not particularly forward-thinking socially. So that's one aspect of her work that I think is important to keep in mind. And then here, another, what is this? What are we looking at here? This strange picture.
They had the beach, but there were mermaids.
It looks like a fake movie photo shoot or something, like a studio.
Yeah, it's a backdrop.
Yeah.
It's actually a place where people go to enjoy leisure time in the city when they want to be on a beach. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's a real place, and it's, you go, yeah, exactly, you go swimming, it's like a pool, but it's set up as if it's a beach, and there's this sort of fake sky, and bright light that comes in, and so the sense that you can go to the beach without leaving the city. You can have that experience. So here she's depicting this really intensely artificial, kind of futuristic experience that's actually part of everyday life. In that people can just be like, oh, okay, it's Saturday, what are we going to do? Let's go to the beach.
Is this in? Where
It's in Japan. I'm not sure what city it's in. So, coming back to Pure Land. So this is one of these works that's really challenging. Like, I'm not going to pretend it isn't, because this is one of a number of photographs, one of 4 photographs that accompanied a 3D video installation. So this is kind of like just a little bit, a little tiny sense of what the exhibition actually was. And we can't see how it was because it was a 3D video installation. But I can tell you a little bit about it. So this, as the other photographs, and it's behind glass, so it has a very sort of glossy material quality. It's big. This is a still from the video. So in the video, she's floating around in this landscape, and it's the Dead Sea is what she has used as the landscape source. So what can you tell me about the Dead Sea? Anybody, where is it?
Nothing grows there. It's I mean, it's so salty. It's kind of in comparison to the Salt Lake. It's very exciting.
Yep. We actually have some familiarity with. Yes. So it is, nothing grows in it. Nothing lives in it. It is literally a dead sea. It has a very high saline content. Although compared to the Great Salt Lake, like people swim in the Dead Sea. It's seen to have restorative qualities. You float in it, it's amazing. You like bob up onto, because it's the water is so dense with salt. Yes?
So I went to the Dead Sea and people would literally take the mud from the Dead Sea
Yes.
and just like cover themselves.
Yeah. I have a little facial mask at home, Dead Sea mud. Yeah, it's lovely. So there is a different relationship. I think it's not as stinky, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember it
Not
being
the sulfur
stinky?
quality,
Yeah.
but it's higher salinity than the Salt Lake. Salt
Yes.
Lake's like 20%.
Right.
And it's a lot higher.
Right. So why might she have used this context? Any thoughts on what the Dead Sea means?
Keep going the way we're going.
Ooh, you're seeing a really dark kind of, yeah, you're like,
Well, these guys are certainly happy. It's really an interesting, like those little creatures seem to be cavorting and like playing the flute.
yeah, they're all playing musical instruments.
And so that all seems quite like lovely, but it is a dead place.
Although there's a lotus blossom floating in it, which of course is a thing that is alive, at least theoretically.
There's actually a lot of references in the Bible to the Dead Sea,
Okay,
which because she's Japanese, you wouldn't immediately make biblical connections, but
but there is,
this is a global world.
it is, and there are a number of things about her work that raise sort of comparisons with Christian cultural history. One of the most obvious is in this installation. You walk in, you're wearing 3D glasses, only 20 people are allowed in, you're watching this video, so you're just, your whole world visually is occupied with these images. There's sound, she's singing, there's this sort of abstract musical sound, and when it's over, a cool scented breeze blows on you. So she's activating all of your senses. Now, does this sound familiar to anyone who has, say, taught the history of Gothic cathedrals? Does that sense of creating a space where you are taken out of your everyday experiences, where everything, sound, smell, visuals, they are otherworldly. They're transcendent. They lift you up. And so she's engaging that tradition. Now, most Westerners know it through the history of the cathedral, which gave you sort of colored light through stained glass windows, these ceilings that just went up forever, incense burning, music, a completely alternate reality to the one that you experience in your daily, muddy, disgusting medieval life. I mean, it just was poop everywhere, everywhere. So within many religious traditions, we see this use of a controlled, aesthetically activated space to encourage prayer, devotion, or meditation. And her work, while it is grounded in Eastern traditions and religions, is very spiritual. She's very interested in this idea of transcendence, and that her art can support transcendence. And she also wants it to be universal. She wants it to be accessible to everyone, although she's drawing on a variety of different cultural signifiers. I have a lot of notes here. I want to make sure I haven't missed anything.
Is that a picture of her?
Yes, it is. And so she's usually the person in her, she makes these costumes, she made this one, and she models them. So Pure Land, so Nirvana is the name of the entire project. Pure Land, what does that suggest to you? Just initially.
Japanese.
Okay, so why? What is the...
Because I just read a chapter that said Pure Land Buddhism in the Japanese section.
Yes, oh, okay. So it's not just Japan. Japan, China, Korea, and Vietnam. It's very common. So did the book tell you what Pure Land meant?
I almost tried to figure out the difference between all of them. Is it not related to Zen?
Oh, I can't answer that question.
Where I kind
Yeah.
of like, I'm going to say Pure Land.
There's a lot going on. But here I'm actually, what I want to get at is so Pure Land is a type of Buddhism, but it also is a place. Yes?
Pure Land is the place where Buddha is. In Pure Land, if I'm right, is. And Buddhists can help take you there.
Yes.
That is the place you want to go. It would be comparable in a Christian context to paradise.
Yes, exactly. This is the place you aspire to go. So here we have an image. So Amida, there are a number of different spellings of Amida because it originates in India and then it travels really throughout East Asia. But Amida Buddha is tied to Pure Land Buddhism, is the Buddha of Pure Land Buddhism. And so here you see the Buddha, and then I don't know if you can see it, but all of the attendants, the bodhisattvas who go down and help people to attain enlightenment, right? And bring them up to the Pure Land. So we have this setting that offers a very clear reference. The Buddha sits on a lotus flower, right? She floats over a lotus flower. She has all of these attendants. This image has been given as her primary source for her costume, but there's another one that I would like for us to look at also. So who is she?
Is she a bodhisattva? I mean, her outfit is so elaborate.
It's a little, I mean, the way she's positioned, it's like she's the Buddha.
Right.
She's like the goddess.
Yes, she is. It's like this sort of, she's combining the image of a woman, a mortal woman who is devout and becomes enlightened, and an image of the Buddha. So the reason it's been compared to this image is I know it's difficult to make out, but she's holding a prayer stone and she has this sort of the blessing mudra, right, which is an imitation of this. But her costume and general appearance also can be tied to this image, which is from China. So one thing to be aware of with Mariko Mori, she is in no way a purist. She pulls things from all over and combines them. Again, there is a real openness to a kind of hybridity in her work.
If you were just coming to her as an artist, how would you know to find that Chinese image? Or would there be a reference?
Yes, I came across a name for her figure at one point, and I ran a search, and she's like the maiden of something river. Gao.
The Blue River that we just saw? You just showed the nymph of the Blue.
Oh, yes, that's it. Sorry. Yes, I saw her referred to as the nymph of the Luo River, and I did a search. So there was a poem that was written in like the 2nd century CE, and then there are a number of images. And this one has quite a bit of overlap.
She looks like she's floating too, right above.
Absolutely. Well, nymphs. Right? Now, I don't know within the particular sort of mythological narrative structures in this context what the role of a nymph would be in relation, like, are there nymphs in Buddhist theology? So again, we have this sort of layering or piling up of signifiers. This is another one. This is another one of the 4 photographs that were presented with the installation.
Sinai, is it?
It could be.
Dead Sea.
Sinai.
Burning.
Can it also be read through a Christian lens and say, oh, that was Mary? Or could it be read as like a Renaissance Buddhist
the Venus.
One of her parents was an art historian. And I think it's a very good idea when reading her work to read it as a product of global historical cultures. I mean, she certainly is foregrounding Buddhist theology, but there is a very broad range of signifiers in there. Yes?
In the book of Jeremiah, you read that when Christ comes again back for the second coming, he will come to Jerusalem and go to the temple, and healing waters will spring from the temple and go down the mountain to the Dead Sea and heal the Dead Sea. At the second coming,
okay.
Earth turns into paradise.
So you see her engaging with that.
Maybe.
Like locating this as a site of potential sort of paradise within broader histories. Also, salt. It's been noted that salt was seen to have a purifying quality within Shinto faith. So her use of the Dead Sea has been connected with that history as well. So this is an Enlightenment capsule. It's part of the same body of work, and it's this large globe, and within it we see the lotus, right? So here it's three-dimensional instead of digital or virtual, and there's a setup where, and this just comes from the description of the object, it's essentially capturing and relaying sunlight to it. So the idea is that it must receive sunlight, even though it's all made of plastic and plexiglass. But that the globe itself, I think, is glass. So this idea that it collects sun and then gives that sun, or sort of translates that sun to the audience that comes in. And she has spoken about installations like this as creating a space for audiences to come in and meditate. Right? She wants people to meditate. She wants people to work on achieving enlightenment in these spaces. And although the images and the objects and the materials might remind us of kitsch, like they have kitschy qualities, these funny little alien toys, that's certainly there. And we'll talk about kitsch after the break. We'll sort of dig into the historical meaning of the term kitsch. She's very self-consciously using these kitschy images, but she's also really deeply invested in this utopian dream of a peaceful future. She describes this sort of world in which contemporary technologies have allowed us to network to a point where we all become genuinely spiritually connected and get over our differences, our conflicts. And this is, are you guys familiar with Namjoon Paik? Korean video artist who will come up in the next session. He also, although I think far more ironically, sort of narrates this future. In the 1960s, he's like, with the future of television and video, we will reach world peace. He thought that that would happen because world leaders would fall in love with one another's wives through video conferencing and virtual sex. And war would end, because there's no way that America would bomb the Soviet Union if the American president was in love with the Soviet president's wife. It's all very gendered and sexist. But it was the 60s. But this idea of a future of peace, an ideal, an open and kind of unashamed embrace of this idea of peace, which I think in our cultural context, people are like, that's super naive, right? That's naive, that's impossible. In Japan, especially in the post-war context, I won't go into deep detail, but there was a real embrace of pacifist culture. It was like the culture of the emperor was abandoned, and in its place, the culture of peace and global connection was embraced. And she, even now, decades later, is really playing out that ideal. That the goal of enlightenment is not for you to go to the Pure Land. It is for everyone to go to the Pure Land, to collectively reach a point of enlightenment where we actually can make a pure land of our land.